What's up, guys? In this video, we're just going to go through page 1 and 2 of the Hawaii Standard Purchase Contract. Stay tuned for a basic explanation of what you'll see the buyer or seller. We use the same contract. And if you have questions, let me know. I'm Jeff. I'm an agent in Hawaii. I work with Real Broker, and I'm excited to teach you a little bit about what I know about the purchase contract. It looks complicated, but I think it's more simple than yeah. Let's just get into it. All right. So when you're potentially buying a house in Hawaii, it always starts with, well, I guess everybody's process is a little bit different, but chances are it's going to start with doing an actual purchase agreement or purchase contract. Let me see if I can zoom out so you can see. I want you to see everything. There we go. Okay, so this is a blank purchase contract. This is the most recent one. So this is what I'm using to write offers for my clients right now. And it's like fill in the blank, which is really good for realtors because we're not supposed to be writing contracts. We're able to just use a standard language. And all we do is change the stuff in here. And I don't mean to make that sound like it's not a big deal because it is, but it makes it easier on everybody. So starting from top, now I'll zoom back in. We start here. Okay, so this contract. All of our contracts have to be reviewed by a broker, right? So in Hawaii, you've got real estate agents. Some real estate agents join the National Association of Realtors. That's how you get access to stuff like this. And all real estate agents, when they join, whether they join the National Association of Realtors or not, they are real estate agents. But when you're more experienced, you can take a test and become a broker. And a broker kind of has like supervisory responsibilities for the brokerage, one of which is to review the purchase contract. And they're going to review it because technically, when this contract is made, the brokerage is representing the client, not just the agent. So that's why the broker has to sign it. And they're reviewing for accuracy, they're reviewing for completeness and, minimizing liability, stuff like that. So like for me, I would put in here Real Broker, boom. And then depending on the broker I request to sign, I'll put their name in. Reference date, I always put the day that I'm preparing the offer. And this is kind of how we refer to this agreement. We'll say like purchase contract reference, January 20th. It's kind of like an ID. This is where you put the subject property, like the one that's actually being purchased. You put the address here. Not every property has an actual address that'll fit like that. So you put in the TMK. And 99.9% of the properties in Hawaii have a TMK number. We can dig into more of that, but if it's on Oahu, it's going to start with a 1. I'm out here in Wainea, so the next number will be an 8. And then you'll fill in the rest based on the actual property. So you'll see here, like there's a lot of warnings. And there's a lot of I would say legal jargon. This top paragraph here that I'm looking at kind of spells out how this contract is, it's not like my property. It's actually the property of the Hawaii Association of Realtors. So I shouldn't be like editing this. I shouldn't be blocking stuff out. It's basically a full contract. I need to leave it as is. And any member that's using this is bound by ethics as put forth by the Hawaii Realtor Association. And then you go down here, the purchase contract becomes a legally binding contract for the purchase of real estate upon execution by the parties. And what they mean by the parties is usually buyer and seller, as we can see there. Okay. Fill in all the blanks. Paragraphs preceded by checkoff boxes are optional and must be checked to make a part of the purchase agreement. Write NA if not applicable. Not everybody does this. Anyways, getting into the contract itself, A1, this is not preceded by brackets or checkoff boxes, so it's not something that we can disregard. This applies to every transaction, right? So most transactions are going to have a seller's agent, an agent or brokerage representing the seller, and their interests only. They owe them the highest duties, such as confidentiality, loyalty, and due care and diligence. Transactions often have a seller's agent and a buyer's agent. right? Brokerage firm that's doing the exact same thing, but just for the buyers, not for the sell side. Dual agent, this is really important. Brokerage firm represents both buyer and seller. This happens when the same agent is representing the buyer and seller. This happens when the same different agents from the same brokerage are representing buyer and seller. It's kind of a big deal, and it changes how you can like handle the transaction. Like it even says here, dual agents must remain neutral in negotiations and must not advance the interest of one party over the other. That's kind of a big deal, and we can talk about the dual agency disclosure later on in another video. And then there's no agency. So buyer or seller is a customer. This happens when like an agent is representing only the seller or only the buyer. And then in the example of a seller, maybe it's a for sale by owner. Or in the example of a buyer, maybe the buyer just doesn't want an agent. And that's okay. You can mark that there is no agency representation. You still have to kind of protect them in a way, but it's not the same as agency. And so for the sake of the purchase contract and every single agreement, we actually spell it out. Like who is representing the seller? Are they represented? Are they a member of the National Association of Realtors? Period. Right. And we put it on page 1. So that way, before anyone even gets into the contract, they know who is representing who. And that's important for a lot of reasons. I think the biggest reason is you need to know who's on your side and who is not necessarily against you, but not on your side, right? This isn't like an adversarial relationship between seller and buyer, but if someone's an agent for the seller, they're just not obligated to give you loyalty, due care, and diligence or confidentiality. And it's important that you know that. And this is where it spells it out very, very simply. So you'll see the name of the brokerage, not the name of the agent. You'll see whether or not they are or are not a member of the National Association of Realtors. And that's section A2. That's probably one of the most important, like non-house related disclosures. It probably is the most important disclosure in the contract that's not directly related to the property. B1, this is the initial earnest money deposit. This just says that the buyer will deliver the EMD within X number of days. Very common to see all types of numbers in here. I've seen 1 day, I've seen 0 days, like as in the check is already with escrow. I've seen 5 days. I've seen more. It just depends. This can be more or less important to the seller or the buyer. It can be a part of a bigger strategy of actually getting an accepted offer. So it's just something to consider. I would say for most of my sellers, they want to see the earnest money in escrow like ASAP, as soon as possible. Here you'll see initial spots for buyer and seller. There's no like minimum number or maximum number of buyers or sellers. The sellers, if it's a property that's for sale, you want to make sure that every seller on title has an opportunity to review the contract and sign it. Any buyer that's on the loan or any buyer that wants to purchase the real estate, they need to initial every single page as well. All right. This is kind of the meat and potatoes section. This is a cool part because section C details really the numbers related to the transaction. And this is where we'll stop actually. So I'll try to get through to C3 and C4, but we might pick up there next time. My goal is to try and make these just 10 minutes. So when you're submitting an offer, today's the 20th. Let's say we get all our signatures tonight and we submit it tonight. I think it's a courtesy to give at least 48 hours to the seller to review. That might even be kind of short notice considering it's already, what time is it? Yeah, it's already 6:00. So it might be nice to do actually Friday, and we'll give them, till like 10 a.m. More often than not, the buyer that I'm representing, they don't really care. They're going to defer to me in my judgment. And this is basically a conversation with the listing agent. We'll just say like, hey, how much time does your seller need? Are they off island? Are they maybe, not tech friendly and they need to review things in person? Whatever. This is a nice point to be flexible and kind of extend a bridge. C2 talks about the purchase price and kind of how it breaks down, right? So the total purchase price is blank. That actually is calculated based on everything we put in here, right? And it counts up all of these things. So for example, that initial earnest money deposit we talked about, A lot of times we see like, I don't know, we'll say 1% of the purchase price, which can be a lot. Sometimes we see a lot less than that. Sometimes we see like $1,000. We put that in there and boom, it auto calculates to $1,000. And then if we go here, additional deposit, this is very common to do. So we do one at the beginning of the transaction, and then very common, we do another one sort of midway in the transaction. This defaults to a date, but more often than not, we just say within a certain time period. And we don't put that literally. We say like what the time period is, right? And then that calculates here. This is oftentimes where we'll put the mortgage amount. So let's say we're buying a $500,000 home and they're using a VA loan or even a USDA loan with 0% down. Then we'll put the full purchase price there. And because this tallies it all up, you can see we're actually offering a little bit higher. So we would adjust that in one of these lines. We would say minus 2,000. And we'll just say something super simple like EMD refunded at closing or applied to closing costs. Right? Super simple. There is a ton of strategy here, like a ton. And I'm not going to go into all of it tonight, but basically the way you structure this is probably one of the more important things to the sellers. There's a bunch of stuff in this contract when we get into C3 and C4 that are going to be super important to the seller as well. But I mean, the total purchase price is probably the main thing. So we're going to stop here. We're past our 10-minute mark. We stopped at section C2. We'll talk a little bit more about that next time, and we'll jump into C3 and C4. You guys have a good night. If you have any real estate questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Aloha.